So I want to tell you a very complicated story, but I'm not going to tell you the complicated part. I'll try to make it simple. It's exciting. It's also, there were a bunch of people talking about longevity. So this is actually the one thing about longevity that's actually scientifically proven. So here am I talking a little longer. So let's see, what's the next one? Okay, so just this is who I am. My story is generally that I was an academic physician. I was a cancer doctor. Blood cancer doctor. I trained at the University of Washington. I ran a new drug program at City of Hope for many years. Went through various jobs, got my full professorship. Then went into pharma. Did very nicely there. I even had a company. Where's that pharma guy? I had a company that was bought by Merck for $2.9 billion. So this is a good story. So what I'm going to tell you now in very short, concise fashion is about more than 10 years of work that came to a really happy end exactly a week ago. So my last few slides that I'm going to show you are pictures that I took at the big blood cancer conference last week in Orlando. So it's really cool to be able to tell you the good ending to the story. So as you know, blood cancer, leukemia is a terrible disease. It's still a terrible disease, but it used to be, when I started my career, it was much more horrible. So if you see, it's a disease primarily people as they get older, and the older people get, the worse the disease gets, and the treatments were essentially terrible in the old days. So, you know, in older patients, there's a lot of factors that make things worse in the disease. So people have stronger disease, harder to treat, makes them more sick. Much bigger challenge. Now, this is what things look like this is exactly when I started to do new drug development. This is what it looked like. In younger patients who have the disease, like 50% of patients can get some response for a little while, but the vast majority of the patients, who are the older patients, got very little benefit from treatment. But it didn't stop everybody from treating them. So we gave very intense chemotherapy, very nasty treatments. I'm sure the things that people think about in this audience, when you think about when people get cancer and how they look, that was what would happen with patients with leukemia who are older. So I'm going to tell you, I'll give you the ending away from the start. It's a whole new story now. For both older and younger patients, we have molecular treatments that are much more effective without any of those old toxicities. So let me show you briefly what we did. So the first thing was, this was like a big moment for me. When I started to do leukemia work as a new drug development person, as a person who used to do blood stem cell transplants before, the fact that it didn't matter, even if we gave intensive chemotherapy, the outcomes were the same. In the older patients, they just didn't work. So it seemed to me at the point obvious that there was no point in giving these nasty poisonous treatments to people who aren't going to respond. So we spent a lot of time developing a new way of treating them. And in order to understand what we discovered, I will have some colorful slides. These are, by the way, exactly the only drugs that I know that are actually effective in longevity work are drugs in this class. So, particularly in skin cancer. So let me explain how this works, because this is kind of cool. And actually, these two slides got me a lot of invitations to speak all over the world, so I'm glad to share them with you. But essentially, I'm going to talk about something called epigenetics. Epigenetics is changing the way that genes function without affecting the actual genes, without changing DNA or any of that. Rather, the way that DNA and genes can be turned on and off. So rather than changing the genes themselves, which is a much more toxic thing to do, we can actually control them by simply turning them on and off. And the best example for this, I think, is Dr. Valeria Santini, her slide. See these two animals? That if you came from another, oh, you guys forgot to get this thing? Yeah, well, my throat was. So, if you look at these two animals, if you were coming from another planet, you would not think that they were the same thing, right? But actually, they have the same DNA. Now, as you know, every cell in your body has all of your DNA. So obviously, it's very important that some of it get turned on correctly, on and off in the right way. You don't want, for example, teeth growing on your forehead. So how does that get controlled? So the way that that control happens is something called epigenetics. So these two guys are the same, but all the genes that make it look like this get turned off, and then these genes that make it look like this get turned on. So controlling that process is exactly what happens in cancer. So I had to give a talk, I had to give a couple talks around the world. I didn't want to use her slides. I wanted to come up with my own picture for this, like a very American way to present this data. So here it is. You ready? Are you ready? You with me? Okay. So this is my slides to present this concept. So this is the Incredible Hulk. Now, this metaphor is very important because it's exactly what happens in lymphoma, leukemia, and autoimmune disease. Now, see, if you know the story, this guy and this guy are the same. But in the face of dangerous circumstances, if there's an enemy or some kind of problem that happens in the surrounding environment, he takes on these adaptive changes and can fight against the invaders. Now that's exactly what happens in our body, probably to most of us right now at this very moment, because of the flus that are going around when you get a cold, right? So our lymphocytes, our immune system, goes from being resting cells that are sitting in the lymph nodes, they transform and become this monstrous killer cell that runs around and kills all the invaders. But the trick is, it has to come back. It has to go back to normal. Now, if it doesn't go back to normal, then you get a situation. You get any of three situations. You get leukemia, where the cells just keep growing. Lymphoma, another form of cells just growing, or autoimmune diseases, where the cells fight normal targets, like they fight your own body. So the question is, yes, like lupus, exactly. So the question is, so the whole point of this talk is, can we turn the leukemia process around and make the leukemia cell become this guy? And if we do that, we change survival. So the answer is, as of last week, yes, we can do that for everyone. I don't think I have a lot of time. I just want to show you. This is work from my own lab with Yanju that I did, where we worked very heavily on this process. And this is a patient with lymphoma who was sent to a hospice to die. She had very, very big tumors. You don't need to be real. See this big black thing here? So we gave her a drug called an HDAC inhibitor that is meant to turn around this process. And 6 months later, she came back to the clinic. We thought she had passed away. 6 months later, she came back to the clinic out of hospice and was entirely cured of the disease. She's still alive today. So it's over 15 years that this patient is in response.
So you have to retreat. So what's the percentage?
Oh, it's just an oral drug. It's the same drug that
You don't get
this particular drug is the same drug that seizure patients take, and it has that activity, so they just stay on it. It's not toxic, nothing. So we published this. Then we had another study with a commercial product from Merck. You can see this patient has a lot of tumor. No chemotherapy, just a pill. Take it in my mouth. And is also still in response many years later. So this is kind of the idea. So if you understand that, you can, that's the main takeaway. Let me just show you some quick data, and then let you get on to whatever else you're doing tonight. But here is some stuff that we published demonstrating this in lymphoma patients. that we did at City of Hope in my California days. So now, just very quickly, because I know I'm running out of time, I want to show you the data in leukemia that we just got this past week that showed that using these kind of drugs now is effective against leukemia in all ages. So here was the first evidence. This drug, azacitidine, is a hypomethylating agent. It's an epigenetic drug. It's the first one on the market that had this activity. And this was studied against all chemotherapies, transplants, any kind of therapeutics. And this mild therapy that doesn't need people to be in the hospital, doesn't make them lose their hair, doesn't make them sick, was more effective than the nasty chemotherapy that we used to see. Now again, this is not like magic or alternative medicine or anything. This is standard medicine that we practice in the hospital. So the question was, how can we make it better? So I published a study a couple years ago where we got a 50% response rate in upfront leukemia when we added 2 epigenetic drugs together, which was, I think, one step forward. But now we have a much more effective and better combination. There's a drug called venetoclax, which is a BCL2 inhibitor. Essentially, the HMAs are the epigenetic drugs that we're talking. Their goal is like that returning from the Hulk state to a normal state, they bring back the normal profile of the DNA from the mutated one, and then combine it with what's called a BCL2 inhibitor that makes the cells more sensitive to that activity. Now that combination, we're near the end, that combination, 3 slides in the end, that combination has now become the standard therapy. So I'm kind of like pleased to have been an active part in changing the way that therapeutics go in the world for leukemia. So now this is the standard therapy. That was the curve I showed you before. If you add venetoclax, it's even better. So now we're at a point where 90% of patients who are over the age of 60 who get this drug will have a response to this and won't need chemotherapy or any of those like toxic things. The treatment can be done at home. The world is entirely different. So last week, that's why it's a photograph. This is from the convention that I was at, the American Society of Hematology in Orlando last week. So last week they did a study where they took this treatment mode that I've been explaining to you, and instead of limiting it to the older patients, see up till now they gave the toxic chemotherapy to younger patients, and then if they were older or they didn't think they would survive that chemotherapy, they would give them this. But people are starting to say, that chemotherapy doesn't work that well. Why do we keep punishing people with it? So what happens if we use this more tolerable molecular therapy in younger patients and older patients? So what happens? Voila. Actually, they did better. So here is all patients of all ages treated with the standard chemotherapy. If any of you knew people who had leukemia, they went into the hospital, they spent 6 months in the hospital, they were very, very sick, lost all their hair, all that kind of stuff. That's the old standard. If they gave the same types of patients this new epigenetic therapy, this new form of therapy, actually the outcomes were better. So the world just changed a week ago. This is now has become the standard therapy. And this is my last slide. This was the big presentation. You see the film crew and everything. This is the plenary session at ASH. 30,000 people in the room, everybody cheering. Finally, something that I was one of the first people to do it. I should add, I was the guy who was sent to Seoul, to Korea, to open this class of drugs when it first came out many, many years ago, about 2005. So those of us early people who were in this field, it was very exciting to see. But now the standard of care for everybody is this new form of therapy. And my last sentence is, I'm on the pharma side. I'm the CMO of a drug company, And I have, one of my drugs is meant to combine with these and help even increase the activity even more. There are some leukemias that don't respond so well to this therapy that seem to respond to our treatment. So, you know, I think very quickly we will see more and more new therapies in these fields. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Trump. Now we know why